Okay, Jussi, you're ready, you're on, and you have a room full of people.
Oh, wow.
Hundreds and hundreds of people.
You're just saying that, aren't you? There's
I
like
am
nobody there.
Yes. We'll record it, and it'll feel like you're lots of people here, but no one's watching you. So
awesome.
No pressure whatsoever. So you ready to go? And time's yours.
All right, awesome. Hey, hello, everybody. Thanks so much for coming. I'm Jussi from Ekahau. I really do appreciate the opportunity to do this via video. My first video speaker slot ever, so let's see what happens. Seems like the connection quality is good enough and all right. And yeah, during the session, if you have any questions, just feel free to ask, and Keith will repeat them for me. So that's how it's gonna work. I wish I could be there. I really do. There in Maastricht. I hope the weather is treating you and the conference is treating you well. Unfortunately, I'm here in Santa Clara, California right now. So let's see how we can work this out over video. All right. Wondering if I can share my screen so that you don't need to look at my, average quality hotel room. You could just look at my screen instead of my face. So let me see if I can share my screen here. Here we go. Can you see this okay? All I can see is the ceiling of the conference room. Keith, can you see my screen all right?
We still see your face.
What about now?
Now we see your face in the corner. And Survey Superpowers is on the screen. Yes, it's working now.
Very good, very good. Let me still take out the video as well if I can.
Actually, your face in the corner is fine.
It's fine?
Yeah, the light shines off your head really well.
Thank you, much appreciated. All right, so today we're going to talk about survey superpowers, so whatever that means. Like I said, I'm Jussi, but more importantly, from Ekahau we have Mikko and Timo. Can you guys raise your hands and stand up, whatever? So Mikko and Timo from Ekahau are actually there. So, any tough questions, any complaints you have, just feel free to, go to those guys. If you have any praises, any thank yous, I'd be happy to accept them. No, I'm kidding, of course. All right, so first of all, thank you so much, Keith, for, putting up another great conference, and thanks for letting us present. It's really, we really do highly appreciate this, and we're happy to have this kind of a conference in the industry made by the people who actually need this kind of conference. So, it really shows. And even though I'm here now, I really do look forward already to Wireless LAN Pros Dallas in, February, early February. All right, first things first, so, these slides will be at our webpage. There's a ton of information there. You want to go there and check it out. The reason I have this link up there is because Ekahau's webpage is divided into two parts. There's the white part, which is the location tracking stuff, and then there's the black part, which is the Wi-Fi tool stuff. And we're talking about the black part today. And if you go to the ekahau.com front page, you will need to click the black banner to kind of get to the Wi-Fi tools page, all right? And I'm sure all of you pretty much are already on Twitter. If you're not, join today, sign up today, and follow me if you want. So myself, Mikko, Timo, everybody will be posting Ekahau-related updates and Wi-Fi-related updates. So I really do look forward to seeing you there. And any kind of product questions you have, things like that, you can also post them on Twitter. And there's a there's a chance we will answer. There's a chance, somebody from the very active community answers. So, by the way, the community's involvement in our product creation and even support is really highly appreciated. So, thank you guys. It's so quiet, and I can't see you guys. Is anybody? Am I still on, Keith?
It should be all okay.
All right, very good. So. Yeah, before we begin the actual stuff, if you want background knowledge, if you want to, strengthen your knowledge about Wi-Fi and our tools and stuff like that, we do have an awesome training program hosted by this guy here. What is his name? Keith? Keith P. something or another. Yeah. But we're really happy to have Keith on board as a trainer. He, does a lot of work, travels around the globe, and if you go to our webpage, you can see, the training locations and dates, and from that you can see that, Keith doesn't just sit around and organize these conferences, he does do a lot of training work as well. So, great 3-day training followed by a certification test, so definitely highly recommended if you want to learn more. And if you're more into self-study, then go to ekahau.com/training, where you can find videos mostly by Amanda telling basically how our tool works. So there's short videos, there's long videos, there's even webinar recordings, all that fun stuff there. So definitely go there, check it out. Everything is free of charge, all the videos, all the material. There's, 10 plus hours of video, 30, 40 video clips. So there's a lot of stuff there. Definitely recommend going. All right. So the topic is survey superpowers. So let's already get to it, right? How much time do we have? I don't have a clock here, but I guess we're still okay, I hope. All right. So, the basic stuff. So the Ekahau site survey takes in bitmaps or CADs or vector graphics or stuff like that. And if you bring in a CAD drawing or several, those will be converted to vector graphics internally. So you bring in the CAD drawing, the CAD specifics are gone at that second, and it will be converted into SVG. And for maps, this is the basic stuff, right? For surveys, predictive or on-site, you want a white background. You want your scale to be visible somewhere on the map, and most importantly, the maps need to be up to date. So, that map that served the hospital 10 years ago is probably not very good anymore. You don't want to, walk into an ER room when you think you're walking to a lobby. Then there's the eternal question of talking about CAD files. Can't you just read the walls from the CAD files? Yeah, this is actually in alpha version already. I'm sure Mikko can show you a demo of taking in a CAD drawing and reading the walls off of the CAD drawing. So it's going to be really cool. We are planning to release this in January. So yeah, I can hardly wait. This will strip down 80% of the planning time, 80% of the cases. So it will still look horrible, 80% of the CAD files, because some of them are just a mess, let's be honest. But 80% of the time, it will work awesomely well. Okay, I don't know how fast the update rate here is, but then people ask are you guys still updating your product? Are you guys still around? What's going on? And I tried to create this animation. I hope you can see the text starting to move. This is just to illustrate what have we been doing in the last year or so. So it should be scrolling really, really smoothly, but I expect it not to be that way, depending on the network connection. But this is just, the things we've done in the last year, the changes we've done. This is just to say that Mikko and Timo and the guys, they're just not sitting on their hands. They're actually coding this stuff. They're fixing the product. They're improving it, creating features, doing things like that. Okay, and within the last 6 months, there's been a few improvements. Some of them even, not specified by Keith. Much of them actually specified by Keith. So, for example, Keith was helping out in the latest 7.6 release when it comes to the new legend, color legend, and channel overlap visualizations and things like that. And we've added a ton of stuff also. People wanted the planner to be even better, the network planner. So we added things like height of the walls and holes in the floor and stuff like that. Many of these requests actually came in the WLPC Dallas 6 months ago. So we're really excited in not just fixing the product, but also bringing in new stuff as we go. All right, you guys still there? If
We're
you're not,
here. It's okay.
I'm having coffee. I hope you guys have some too. All right. And is the audio okay, Mikko?
Yes.
Very good. Any questions at any time, just feel free to raise your hand and let us know. All right, so let's talk about on-site surveys first. How do you get the most out of those? How do you get started? So this is the basic slide that I like to show, like Wi-Fi network lifecycle and why it's kind of important to survey, whether it's predictive or on-site. So you start from 12 o'clock and move clockwise, so planning, validation, troubleshooting, and monitoring. And before you do any kind of surveys, you probably want to figure out what are the requirements for the network. So, you know, the types of clients, the coverage, required coverage areas, the applications, the number of clients, things like that. Followed by things like predictive surveys, pre-deployment surveys is somewhere between the plan and the validation. Then the actual post-deployment validation survey, followed by some spectrum analysis. And when you get to troubleshooting, it's usually either spectrum analysis or packet analysis, or then just basic RSSI tools, things like that. And then when you get to the monitoring, you do some either, well, most of it, let's be honest, is the continuous monitoring done by the Wi-Fi infrastructure or by systems like our friends at 7Signal do an excellent, 24/7 KPI SLA type of monitoring system as well. So if you want to complement your infrastructure with that, that's good. Then you might perform some client-based periodic health check surveys. Let's say once a year, you quickly survey the site from the client perspective using a site survey tool just to make sure that things are going okay. I don't know if anybody ever really does that, but it would be a good practice if you did. So then there's all this confusion about what type of surveys and what does it actually do. So this slide kind of tries to answer that. The survey phases, there's really 4, right? So predictive, which is also called network plan and simulation. Then there's the pre-deployment stuff where you take an AP on a stick or 2 and then kind of move them around the site to get an actual feel for the RF environment at the site. And then there's post-deployment site surveys. So let's look at only the first 3 ones. Consider only predictive, pre-deployment, and post-deployment. First of all, how many in this hall, in this lecture hall now do site surveys in the first place? Mikko, can you tell the approximate percentage? So how many of you, raise your hand, how many of you do some kind of site surveys, predictive, pre-deployment, post-deployment, anything?
Most of the audience, I would say.
Most of the audience, very good. So for those that do, how many of you consider predictive as your primary survey type? So consider these 3, predictive, pre-deployment, and post-deployment. So predictive, how many of you consider the planning as your primary type of surveys? How many is it, Mikko? I can't see you.
That many hands anymore. Couple of them.
Okay.
5, 10, something like that.
Very good. And what about pre-deployment? So AP on a stick, for how many is that your primary type of surveys that you do? Raise your hands, be honest.
A lot more, I would say.
Okay, and what about post-deployment? Raise your hands for post-deployment.
And even more.
Sorry, Mikko, repeat,
and even
please.
more.
Okay, very good, very good. And that's really how it should go. I mean, post-deployment site surveys, they are the most important kind in a sense that, if you can't be sure the network works as a whole, then you're, just doing guesswork. And some people like to do more on top of that. Some people like to do more pre-deployment. Some people like to do more predictive. Some people like to do both of them. And that's fine. That's fine. Let me try and illustrate this in a single slide. And if you remember one thing from this presentation, this is super, super important. So if you don't do any surveys, on a Jim Carrey scale, he's not very happy, okay? If you do post-deployment validation surveys, for example. Oh, he's kind of more happy. You do predictive surveys on top of that. Yeah, even happier. And then, you know, periodic checkups, APs on a stick, he gets super happy. And now, let's illustrate that also on a Richard Gere scale. So, charming smile, still same kind of charming smile. Yeah, he seems to be a man of one facial expression. So, yeah, if you remember one thing from this presentation, it would be this, right? The more surveys you do, the more happier Jim Carrey is. And then it's not just those types of surveys. There's also, like for on-site surveys, there's different survey types and different processes for all of them and different results that you get from different types of surveys, obviously. So predictive gives you that simulation to kind of determine, you know, where to place the access point, how does my network look like prior to the deployment, do I have enough capacity to support all of those clients?
All
and
right.
that's, by the way, the most overlooked thing ever after CCI is the whole capacity challenge and, you know, am I supporting all the capacity, stuff like that. So your predictive should also answer that question.
So, Jussi, we do have a question.
Yes, please.
Hi. A bugbear of mine is the word that is banded around predictive surveying. What is that exactly? How do you predict the survey? I mean, it's the terminology I have a problem with. Shouldn't it be predictive design rather than surveying? Because you're not, can you predict the survey?
That's the thing. I used to be like afraid to use this term as well, but it seems to have become a, you know, industry standard. So predictive design, simulation, network plan, you know, whatever you call it, it just seems that predictive survey has become kind of an industry norm for network planning, Wi-Fi simulation, predictive design. So if somebody wants to suggest the exact term to use this, I'd be more than happy. I'm good with predictive surveys. I'm better with predictive design, network planning, Wi-Fi simulation. If we can come into a consensus, that's good.
I like to use the word predictive modeling.
That's very good as well. That's actually, yeah, puts it very accurately. Good question. So next time I'll have these slides up, I'll have it corrected. Not that I would ever reuse any of my slides. These are all new for each conference. Any other questions at this point?
Nope, move on.
All right. So yeah, this is just to say, you know, predictive survey, passive survey, active survey, throughput survey. It comes down to also you and your customers' requirements on what needs to be done at what specific point of time. And having all this said, like, it seems like it's really complex, so there's different phases and you know, different methods and all that kind of stuff. And our challenge really as Wi-Fi tools vendors is to, you know, Wi-Fi as a technology is already really, really complex. And then there's, you know, so many rules that you need to obey and so many industry best practices. And there's so many things to learn that we as vendors need to make our tools as easy to use as possible. And do we really do a good job at it? Well, sometimes we do and sometimes we don't. And no tool is perfect in that regard, of course. So when it comes to our site survey tool, for example, we try to keep it fairly simple for you to start surveying. So let's consider, since the most important seems to be post-deployment verification, how do you do a post-deployment or a periodic checkup survey using our tool? Basically, you import the map, and for surveys, for on-site surveys, it's not that important even to set the scale, so you set some kind of a scale. Then you just make sure that your USB Wi-Fi adapter is inserted in the computer, and then you start surveying. You want to ensure that your integrated Wi-Fi adapter is connected to the network, which it hopefully usually is, and there you go. So try to keep it as simple as possible. No pre-configuration. You don't need to start, you know, configuring the channels or wait times or things like that. Everything works well out of the box. Good default values kind of help with that a lot. And when you do site surveys, this is one of the most important best practices. Use an external adapter when you do it, because it just, gives you those accurate readings. It gives you standardized measurements, so everybody from your team can do it, can get the same results every time out. And my recommendation would be also use either an integrated adapter or a second non-Ekahau Wi-Fi adapter. It could be a Netgear, whatever, the latest AC stuff, for doing active testing simultaneously as you do passive testing as well. And when you fire up the Ekahau tool, you want to focus on the top right-hand side corner. So in those two boxes, you shouldn't be seeing any yellow or orange warning colors. If you're seeing that, it seems like my active survey data is coming in okay and my passive survey data is coming in okay, then you're good to go. You're good to start the surveys. If you want to configure things like channel setups and things like that, you can using the cartwheel. But basically, you're good to go with the surveys as long as your USB adapter is in the computer. So just bring in a map and start clicking on the map. So here's the deal. If you really want to perform surveys faster, you're probably better off getting, let's say, a second or a third Wi-Fi adapter. And these Wi-Fi adapters can then be configured. They are actually automatically configured to kind of split the frequencies. So if you bring in second USB adapter, the other one will scan 2.4 and the other one will scan 5. And if you bring a third one, we will cut 5 gigahertz in half so that, 2.4 takes roughly 1 second, lower channels of 5 take roughly 1 second, and then upper channels of 5 take roughly 1 second to scan. So you get that super fast scanning on both 2.4 and 5. Or you could assign all of these. What I like to do is assign all of these Wi-Fi adapters to scan all 2.4 and 5 so that you get more readings, you can survey more quickly, but still, even if one of these adapters breaks down or whatever, you still get a ton of data. So either way is just fine. Point being, actually this slide here. So the question is, how fast can I then walk during my survey having these different number of adapters in the computer? This is a very, very common question. So one adapter would be like, that normal gentleman's pace walking speed where you kind of take your time to click on the map, things like that. You got 2 adapters, you can walk pretty fast or even run. And by the way, there's YouTube videos that we recorded about, surveying too fast. So you can go to our blog and maybe search too fast survey, something like that, and you will find, what happens if you survey simply too fast. My knee still doesn't really function properly after that. So point being, if you have 3 adapters, you can go really, really fast. And I'm not talking fast, I'm talking Keith on a Segway with flames coming out of the wheels fast. All right. And how should I actually walk? There's two types of surveys, really. We call them continuous and stop and go. Air Magnet calls them auto sampling and sample on click. So with a continuous site survey, the idea is that you collect data even when you don't click on the map. So the Wi-Fi adapters are scanning all the time, measuring the network. And let's say you start at the beginning of a hallway, you click there, and then you walk to the end of the hallway, click at the end of the hallway, and the tool is measuring all the time between those clicks. And ideally, you would not stop when you turn, you would just continue walking around the site continually, and the Wi-Fi adapter would be scanning all the time, recording a ton of data as you go, even between the clicks. So the advantage of continuous site surveys is, and this is the traditional Ekahau way that we've supported from the beginning, the good thing is that it's a lot faster, or it's at least significantly faster than stop and go surveys, and it's really good for long distances and things like that, and it's essential for GPS assisted site surveys. Then the other option is the stop and go surveys. So this means walking to a location, clicking on the map, waiting for the scan to finish, and then moving to the next location, stopping there, clicking on the map, waiting for the scan to finish, things like that. So the advantage of this is, first of all, many of you are used to some other guys' tools and like to use this method. The other advantage is this is actually easier. So it's more straightforward. It's easier to, highlight yourself on the map, stop there for a second, click, and then, move on. It's also orientation independent, so you can choose your orientation when you do this kind of stuff. So it's for example, continuous site surveys are not that good for stadiums because you will be walking like this back and forth, and sometimes you're facing the AP, sometimes you're not. But for example, on a stadium, the spectators are always facing the same way to the field. So in that sense, stop and go would be a better choice for that, to kind of emulate the spectator behavior. Does that make sense? Oh yeah, and did I remember to mention, yeah, the stop and go surveys are not in our product yet, but they will be, Mikko, this month?
2 weeks.
2 weeks, baby. So that's still this month, right? Yeah? No? Yes? I don't know, I'm confused.
Maybe.
Maybe. All right. Always so cautious. Yeah, and if somebody wants to test this before it's out, just feel free to reach out to Mikko and he'll send you a beta version. So the idea is, here's how you select your survey type. You just click on that small arrow there and it will give you the options of either one. All right. Last thing about surveying before we actually go hands-on is, so how do you measure network for phones like Samsungs and the iPhones and things like that? Well, first of all, a well-designed network, if you kind of design the network well using the, let's say, a standard Ekahau adapter and whatever network planning, you follow the good guidelines of like, certain level of RSSI, certain level of SNR, and especially minimize the code channel interference, then the network by design is expected to work fairly well for the phones as well. And what I like to recommend is do your site survey, the complete, let's say, site survey, when you do your post-deployment validation, do that using the Ekahau adapter. But then you can also use, for example, our Android site survey tool to do some spot checks around different areas of the site to make sure that the, let's say that the network works also from the phone perspective. And the Android tool also has this kind of on-the-spot tester where you can just bring it anywhere, fire it up, and it will in 5 seconds, show you the readings of, how the network is performing right here, right now. So it makes active and passive tests. Does that make sense? How much time do we have, by the way? I do apologize, I don't have a clock.
I guess some 40 minutes.
40 minutes?
No,
Wow.
hold on. 35.
35. Very good, very good. So let's take a quick look at a typical site survey, how it's performed, how it's analyzed, and then move to the predictive stuff, okay? So let me see if I can move my video box somewhere, for example, here. All right, so here's the tool. How many has used Ekahau site survey before or seen Ekahau site survey like several times so you're familiar with the UI? How many? Roughly the percentage?
80,
Raise your hands.
80, 90.
80, 90. Wow. So I shouldn't have even covered the basics. I should have stepped right into the advanced stuff then. Anyways, so how you do the survey is this. There's the new survey types as well. The naming is still off, but don't worry, it's a beta or alpha version. So that's how you choose your survey type. This is where you bring in the map, the plus button here, and this is where you select the map if you have multiple floors. All right. And the thing is, when you do the site survey, whether it's autos or continuous or stop and go, the tool will automatically, after the survey, place the access points on the map for you. It will bind the MAC addresses for you. It will, for many vendors, or at least some, it will also bind the radios for you, so for 2.4 and 5 gigahertz, things like that. So the mess of MAC addresses that normally takes place is kind of overcame automatically. And for you advanced users, you can enable and disable and tamper with this, what we call multi-radio and multi-MAC detection, by going to the project menu and either disabling or enabling this logic. And if that doesn't work, then just let us know. And you know, sometimes the product version is not new enough. If you don't have the latest and greatest product, it will not be able to bind together the latest Cisco access points. Or let's say if we haven't updated the product in a few weeks and there's some new stuff from Cisco out that's already there before the product is updated, then we need to add stuff to our product. Same goes with the network planner. If you're using an antenna that's not listed in our planning tool, just let us know, and we will add the antenna there for you. And the response time is usually, well, the response time is quick, but the time it takes for us to add the antenna, what would you say, Mikko? A couple of weeks usually?
No, 4 to 6 weeks.
4 to 6 weeks, dude. You've upped your response time, haven't you? Slacker. Yeah. So yeah, 4 to 6 weeks would be then a typical response time to like adding a new antenna. Of course, if you're in a hurry, you shed some tears, talk Mikko about your dog dying last week, stuff like that. He will do it probably more quickly because he's a sympathetic guy.
Yeah, if you put it on Twitter, I might do it faster.
Exactly. That's how it works. When there's public pressure to do something, we act more quickly. That's actually, yeah, it's sad, but it's true. All right. So this is what things look like after a survey. You have your survey route. You have your access points placed on the map. Obviously, the access points are placed on the map based on a guess done by the survey tool. So it doesn't really know where the access points really are. It just places them where it thinks they are. Okay. And the algorithm is far from perfect for now, but we will be improving it in the future. The point being that you can move the access points to their actual locations by just, grabbing them and moving on the map. So just use the edit tool to move the APs to their actual locations, all right? That's how easy it is. And for those of you not familiar with the tool, for example, AirMagnet does this kind of merging of surveys and different things like filtering, things like that. We don't do any of that. So by default, we just assume that you want to use all the data from all the surveys. And if you don't, then you just go to the survey tab and disable some of the surveys from being used. So the idea being that typically you don't need to jump through any extra hoops or tricks to get all the data. Okay, so the tool is automatically using all the data that you gather. You need to disable the data you don't want to use. All right, so that's kind of the idea. There's 2 columns here actually these days called primary and secondary. You can see those here. What do these mean? Anybody know in the audience? Raise your hand. Primary versus secondary surveys, because this is pretty new.
Well, at least, yeah, we do have a couple of hands, 2 to 3.
Okay, can you bring them the mic, or should I explain it?
Anybody? Go ahead, Jussi.
Okay, so by default, everything is primary. So primary is really what you typically use. But if you start checking the secondary thing, that's used for survey comparison. So instead of looking at your average signal strength or SNR heat maps, there's three different heat maps for comparing the differences between 2 sets of surveys. So the case being, you have surveyed 1 year ago, and now you come back and do some more health checkup surveys. So you surveyed completely when the network was built, and now you want to see what has changed. You would assign the, let's say the surveys you did now would be primary, the surveys you did last year would be assigned as secondary, and then you would ask, what is the difference in signal strength in different locations? And the tool will highlight as a heat map different spots with, let's say, blue or red, meaning, the signal is here much weaker than it used to be. The signal is here much stronger than it used to be. Maybe there's a rogue access point somewhere, and maybe on the other hand, where it's weaker, maybe an AP radio has died without the Wi-Fi infrastructure knowing about it. There's also difference in interference, which basically, well, obviously shows the difference in interference. So, you have more Bluetooth, you have more, worse microwave ovens installed, which are leaking RF or things like that. You have more, somebody installed a wireless video camera without you knowing, and it kills the entire 2.4. Things like that you can easily find using primary and secondary surveys and the differences views. All right? And of course, after the survey, depending on what type of surveys you did, by default, we are doing both passive and active. So it gives you the average signal strength, SNR, pretty much everything you can see here, including things like packet loss, which shows you, in the staircase, when I was walking down the staircase, I started seeing some serious packet loss. And same goes for this edge of the building, for example. And fairly new in the tool is what you see in gray means it fails your current requirements, which can be seen at project coverage requirements. So for example, right now I have voice over Wi-Fi requirements of NEC 67, perhaps a too low SNR of 15, so I might change that just to 20, and things like that. So anything that fails to meet this criteria is shown as gray on the map. And if you want to look at that criteria all in one, you could just ask network health, show me the areas where my network works versus where it fails. Okay? So seems to be working decently except these few areas here. And if you want to know what exactly fails there, you can see, there's too low SNR around these areas. You can see that using the network issues view. Okay? So that's kind of the basics of analyzing surveyed data. One thing I want to show you, I'm sure most of you know this, but these are also fairly new. First of all, the quick 2.4 and 5 gigahertz selector. So let's analyze just a single AP. So we're looking at the coverage for this AP here in the upper left corner. And this is also new, the tooltip that shows all the APs that are audible in that location. So if you only wanted to analyze 5 gig for this AP, you would uncheck the 2.4. So now we're looking at 5 gig. Now we're looking at whichever is stronger, 2.4 or 5. And now we're looking at pure 2.4. So whichever has the orange toggle here is enabled. And this is a combination of, I'm showing signal strength for selected access points. So only for the access points that I select, and then using the additional 2.4 or 5 gigahertz filter. So that's kind of how it works. By default, you're looking at signal strength for my access points, which shows the coverage for your network. And after the survey, how does the tool recognize what is your network versus the others? Well, it looks at the active testing. It looks at where you are associated, which SSID you're associated during the active testing. And it assumes, okay, that SSID is yours. So any AP that distributes that SSID or broadcasts that SSID is then a part of your network, and any other AP is not a part of your network. So it automatically assigns your APs versus the others. All right? Any questions about site surveys? Again, the point being, 2.4 and 5 scanned at the same time, active and passive tested at the same time without you having to configure anything. Right here we can see that, yeah, my NIC is all the time scanning 2.4 and 5 even when I'm not testing, and the active survey is being tested as well, even though I'm not doing any surveys at the moment. So no real configuration needed before you start a survey. You don't need to worry about filtering, merging stuff, about using too much data. Just you can throw a lot of survey data at the tool and it will still work. So Mikko, any hands raised when I asked you have any questions about on-site surveys?
Hey, we have one question.
Woohoo! One brave one.
Active surveys. I stopped using them a while ago because when using Air Magnet, because I was doing so much voice over Wi-Fi, I'd be standing under the next AP. Let's say I started in the corner, I'd be standing under the second AP, and the client hadn't roamed. And I know, Keith has said a number of times you don't want to override the roaming, and I understand the logic behind that. But the problem is, if you're doing voice over Wi-Fi, your density of APs, particularly at 5 gigahertz doing voice, is at the point where your data client won't roam because it might be neg 70 or whatever for the data client, and it's still sitting there. So the results you end up getting, like the additional information you get from an active survey, didn't end up being useful for me at least. I know you guys you're using essentially the internal adapter, and I guess that's better because you're getting a real client at least. But it's still your laptop. It's not any other client in the environment.
Real good question. Is it Scott?
I think I'm the only Australian here, so yes.
Yeah,
yes.
I figured as much. Good to see you, Scott, or see you. And I'm glad you made it to the conference. So excellent question. And for many of the NICs, I believe this one probably too that I'm using here can be tampered with from the device manager. And when you go to the NIC properties, you can force more aggressive roaming. And since any adapter can be used for active testing, you could choose your favorite adapter that either behaves better or that you can configure, because many of those guys can be configured for more aggressive roaming. And then for me, what finally works, if all else fails, I just disable the NIC from the network and re-enable it. Not that it's a good approach, but at least that does the trick then. So the question for us really is how do we then do more client-based voice testing on the active side of things, and we have some ideas for that. I'm not going to publicly talk about those now, but Mikko knows more than I know about this stuff, and we have exchanged ideas just this week and the last. So if you want to talk more about this with Mikko, feel free to do so. I just don't want to talk about this. I'm assuming Mr. Anderson is also in the hall, for example. So we'll leave the roadmap items for later.
Sure. Thank you.
Thanks, Scott. Any other questions?
Yeah, hello.
Hey there.
I'm wondering, I'm not sure how much data you got in that particular survey, but what's the best way of viewing co-channel interference in a survey, if doing active and passive?
Excellent question, excellent question. So this is a mess of a network, right? Because it's from the Ekahau office in Helsinki. But if it's okay, so first of all, co-channel interference analysis is done similarly, whether it's measured data or simulated. So first of all, if we look at the noise levels that were measured, and let me just scroll this back down. So if we look at measured noise levels, not considering whether it's non-Wi-Fi interference or Wi-Fi interference, there is a way to get some basic noise level analysis from the Wi-Fi adapters, and that's what the interference/noise view shows you when you select that. So this is what the Wi-Fi adapter measured as the worst noise over any channel. So by default, we show the worst possible noise over any channel, but you can also change those parameters to show something else as well. So the idea being that this is what was measured, but if you want to analyze code channel interference separately, let me open up a file that actually makes sense for that. For example, this one. And again, this works similarly for measured and simulated data. I just want to open a more manageable file that doesn't have 100 access points in a very small area. So what I like to use, and this is what we call the Keith feature. So you select channel overlap visualization, and this kind of gives you an idea of the channel overlap around the site. Now notice that this site is very low density, so there's not a lot of overlap unless we kind of tweak the minimum signal strength. So this is the minimum signal strength we consider overlapping, and usually people like to use this at either neg 80 or neg 85. I'm just going to put it down to 90 so that we can actually see some actual overlap. So the default values for this are fairly good. And what we can see here when we look at the code channel or channel overlap view is when you roll over the mouse on the map in any location here, you can see that, yeah, actually there's problems in 2 channels here. On channel 11 in this location, I have 4 APs overlapping. Mind you, 2 of those, or 1 of those APs is at neg 90, which is, doesn't matter. And even those neg 84, neg 83, they're kind of right there on the edge whether they matter or not. But this heat map gives you the tool for finding those problem spots, and whether it's surveyed or simulated data, you can then simulate how would changing the channel, for example, how would that impact the code channel interference. So you can change the channel either by just simply right-clicking the radio of the access point and saying edit. And here you have the channel selections. And by the way, you can do this for measured and simulated access points. So you change that to 11. And obviously, since there's now 2 APs on channel 11 close by, it caused some code channel overlap, code channel interference near that AP and also between those APs. And what's kind of cool about this is it looks at 2.4 and 5 gigahertz both at the same time if you have both of these checked. So people tell us, get rid of the 2.4 and 5 simultaneously analysis option. But I don't think it really applies for many things like capacity and channel overlap. You want to look at 2.4 and 5 at the same time.
And sorry, Jussi, does this take into account the channel bonding as well for 5 gigahertz? So you'll see a channel bonding overlap?
Absolutely, absolutely. Takes that all into account. And if you have wider channels, it shows you the primary channel, the secondary channel, and considers their overlap as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Very good. Very, very good question. Any other questions at this point?
Nope.
Nothing. All right. All right. So now that we already opened the planning file, let's just look at that for a second. So for Wi-Fi planning, the best practices really are, again, high quality maps, and the scale is extremely important. And it isn't such a long time ago when I used to say that, yeah, you just measure a scale from a doorway and you're good. But you're really not. I mean, measuring scale from a doorway just means that, you're using a couple of pixels to determine the scale and a very short distance. And what that leads into is the error gets really, really big when you talk about really, really big distances. So you want to measure the distance of a really, really long wall, for example. And for this, Jim Florwick from Cisco always takes pride in his laser measurement tools, and I'm sure Keith has one there as well. So you want to have one of these. For example, our friends at Fluke make an excellent laser measurement tool. So you want to use that when you go on site, or better yet, if you're doing a simulation, you want to ask for drawings that have really, really accurate scale. So that's just super important when it comes to planning. If you're off in your doorway setup, like if you're off by 10 centimeters, it will be 10% off in your map. So it will, large distances, the error will be huge. But once you have that map there, once you have that scale there, there's two ways in the current ESS to do the plan. There's the lazy way, and then there's the accurate way. The lazy way being, let me just draw an attenuation area around the whole map. So I could say, yeah, this is an open office, so I'm just gonna, I'm not gonna draw any walls, I'm just gonna draw one single attenuation area around the map, and that's it. That will kind of assign a generic attenuation factor across the map. You will see APs with circular coverage, but you will get the job done really quickly. Only recommended if you're in a hurry or you need to get that quote out really, really quickly with a really approximate number of APs and their very approximate locations and some pretty heat maps to go with that. But typically, when you're using our tool, I guess, most people do appreciate the accuracy and the ability to draw walls and things like that. And these days, and Timo, who is actually there with you from Ekahau, he's put a lot of work into the three-dimensional algorithm lately in the last year. So what we have now is it's not just walls that span all the way to the ceiling like the other tools. Ours also has the height of the walls, for example. So retail, for warehousing, it's essential to know the height of the walls, because how else do you know how the signals are going to go over the shelves and things like that? So height of the walls really, really matters. And in addition to that, you can also set the lower height of the walls or the attenuation areas. So if you set this, if you use these guys in combination, you can do things like, AC ducts floating in the air, so air conditioning ducts that are spanning, floating in the air. You can do things like false ceilings. You can even model things like, seats on top of an AP. You can model masses of people on top of the AP by just drawing an attenuation area with both upper and lower height associated to it. So it just makes that, it seems like the trend is going so that less and less people, unfortunately, have the luxury of having time and resources to go on site to do a lot of surveys. So, predictive modeling is becoming more and more common. So that's kind of why we have also emphasized the 3D modeling capabilities in the tool. I think this was in 7.5 or 7.6, we also added the hole in the floor. And this was also something that many of you there in the audience, thank you very much, and many of the people in the audience of the last conference, they really wanted to see that, because how else do you model a hotel accurately or a shopping mall if you don't have that hole in the floor capability, right? So basically, this is a tool that draws a hole in the floor, and then the signals travel freely through that hole to the next floor. The super simple example that I like to show of 3D planning is really here. So showing the signal strength on this floor. And by the way, the question could be actually, how do I show the bleed-through from floor 1, and this is a 3-floor building. How do I show the bleed-through from floor 1 to floor 2? How I like to show it is, first I go to Actions, select None, to select none of the access points. I take Show Me Signal Strength for selected APs, which is, of course, at the moment, none. And then in the search box, for example, I could just say, yeah, just filter out everything but the APs on floor 1. So now you can see it filtered out. It's showing just 6 access points out of 22, because I'm filtering out using the filter field everything but floor 1. And then I say select all. So now I have only the APs on floor 1 selected. And now looking at floor 2, even though there's a lot of APs on floor 2, I'm only showing the bleed-through coverage until neg 80 dBm for floor 1, all right? Does that make sense? Just gives you that, bleed-through between the floors. Makes sense, right? The search field is really, really powerful when it comes to measured surveys or on-site surveys as well. If you move your mouse over the search field, you can see how you can use it. So you can just start writing, let's say, the beginning of the SSID or the end of the MAC address or AP name or the band, whatever you have. So, just punch the last 2 characters of the MAC address here, and you will find, let's say you have a survey with 2,000 access points, you will immediately find that particular access point that you're looking for. So it's really, really useful, really, really cool, especially when you have a ton of access points, a ton of MAC addresses that you need to find. What I also wanted to show you is the 3-dimensional aspect of things. 3D is not just floor to floor, right? 3D to me is, height of the access point, down tilt of the antenna, height of the shelves, things like that. So in this case, we have a warehouse. All right, and we have 2 access points set up. Hey, and I'm using meters, and finally I have a place where meters actually are understood. So I've been in the US for a month and continuously have to use feet. So this is luxury. So I have 2 access points placed here with directional antennas. So these are Cisco 3700s with external panel antennas, all right? And they are pointing straight to the side, okay? So they're not currently down tilted, nothing like that. They are pointing straight to the side. So consider this access point here in the top left corner. It's pointing straight, into the building, so to the bottom right, to like 4 or 5 o'clock. The antenna is pointing there. Let's just select the 5 gigahertz antenna only. So I'm gonna disable 2.4. And what we can see here is even right below the AP, there's not much coverage because it's mounted at 17 meters. So the AP is mounted really high. It has a directional antenna pointing to the side. So first thing you'll notice is there's not much coverage underneath the AP. And second thing you notice is since these shelves are only 9 meters tall, much of the signal of the AP actually flies over the shelves if you walk far away from the shelves like this. So the point being, you want to consider that shelf height, that AP height in your design. Warehouses, retail, shopping malls, you're dead in the water without 3D. So when you do that, it starts to look more interesting. For example, you can start considering, how do I get coverage under that AP? So obviously what I want to do is right-click on the 5 gigahertz radio here and start tilting the radio down. And this is exactly what I showed at the last WLPC as well. So Keith, Scott, you've already seen this. But the point being that when I start tilting the antenna down, I start obviously getting better coverage right underneath the AP. All right? I hope you can see that updating. So that's kind of how you would work that. So now we have really good coverage underneath the APE, but obviously, because these shelves are pretty thick, the signals don't go, far in here. Same thing with the other AP. Doesn't bring us much coverage. And hey, there's actually an AC duct there as well. So I modeled an AC duct at 14 meters. Let's see if that makes a difference as well. So if I move the AP over the AC duct, I don't get any signal here. You can see there's a 14 to 15 meter AC duct under the AP. Let me get the heat map out of the way. So there's an AC duct that spans right here under that AP. And if we look at the coverage of the AP, it doesn't provide any coverage under the AC duct because the AP is mounted right above it. So, but if we place it here, further away from the AC duct, we can already see much, much better coverage and not just shoot the AC duct with the signals. And then we would still align the antenna downwards. And there we have it. Now combine these two 5 gig radios, and yeah, we seem to be getting better signal right below the APs like that. So makes sense, and of course both APs also shoot above the shelves as well to some extent. And so what we assume is that the receiver, the Wi-Fi client, is assumed to be at 1 meter height. So that's kind of the base assumption here for the 3D planning. All right, so that's the way you do 3D.
Hey Jussi, we have a couple of minutes to go.
We have a couple of minutes to go. So I was still going to show you capacity planning, but tell you what, we can host another webinar about that later. One thing I do want to show about capacity planning is, if you want to remember one thing about that, it's this, right? More clients, more problems. And you need to account for that in your Wi-Fi design. So the number of clients, their behavior, so the applications run on the clients, and I'm not talking about 100 simultaneous VoIP phones, but I'm talking about how are these VoIP calls used in a given day. You could have 1,000 VoIP phones and 100 of them active at the same time during a given day. Things like that. Then you want to consider whether the clients are legacy or not. And then how do those clients work in combination with your APs? What is your AP structure? Where are they placed? How are the channels optimized? Everything like that needs to be accounted for when you do your plan. And Ekahau Site Survey does have really cool features for that. Let me see if I have some capacity modeling. Not on this one for sure. Do I have office planning example? So the point being that in the planning tool, you want to model your capacity as well. I'm going to open one more project here. So what we like to do is go to the capacity requirements in the tool and then define, what kind of client devices you have. Are those legacy or are they new ones? And what kind of applications are run on those devices. And then based on that data, ESS will tell you how does the network actually work. And this is where you want to check both 2.4 and 5 gigahertz so that it utilizes both radios in the APs. And here's an example, since this is a low density design, that we should turn into a high density design, obviously, because it can't take all those clients. And there's different problems in this network, for example. In this corner, the number of voice calls, simultaneous voice calls per AP is exceeded. On the other hand, when this AP seems to be just overloaded in terms of there's not enough airtime to handle all those packets coming from all those clients. So those are the kinds of problems that you can solve with the tool. And then we can drill down to clients per AP and check out, okay, this AP actually has 56 clients, but there's an overload on the 2.4 gigahertz, obviously, probably because our VoIP phones were 2.4 gig only. So if we changed our BG VoIP phones into ABG, that might already solve some of the problem. Same here, too many VoIP phones clearly on this AP, 2.440, 5 gigahertz, just 7 clients, okay? And then you can find those areas where, let's say, your client distribution between the APs might be inoptimal, things like that. So all I'm saying is capacity, super important. You want to start solving that problem today in your design, okay? We didn't even touch reporting, and there's a ton of cool features there. Feel free to ask Mikko, Timo, myself about those. Now would be a good time for 2 minutes of questions.
Yeah, or less.
Sorry about
we got to
that.
get set for the next one. So, Jussi, thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Even though you had to wake up super, super early this morning, you still have time to take a nap before you have to go and do anything else.
Thanks, Keith. Thanks, Keith. I really do appreciate the opportunity. Thanks, everybody, for listening. I hope there's still somebody in the room. But thanks a lot. Had a great time. Talk to you soon, guys.
Thanks, Jussi. Bye.
Cheers. Bye-bye.